Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and this is the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. I've been lucky enough to have a review sample since they were announced, and since then I've been using this as my main everyday phone. I put it through its paces in Barcelona for a few days, I made a video showing off some of my favorite tips and tricks, and now I wanted to share with you my full review. So I'll cut to the chase. I had been using the Huawei Mate 20 Pro as my daily driver since I guess like October now, quite a long time, and I really have enjoyed using this. The big battery, triple camera setup. The software isn't my favorite, and sometimes the camera was a bit inconsistent, but I really like this. So for me, this was the phone to beat, and I think the S10 Plus has done it. Now there is definitely room for improvement, and quite honestly, I think the smaller S10e is actually a much better value proposition. It kind of feels like the iPhone SE of Android phones. But if you want the biggest, the best, the longest battery, the most cameras, the S10 Plus really is an incredible phone for £900. First question then, is it a big upgrade over the S9 Plus? Well, they both run Android 9 and use Samsung's One UI software, so they do feel very similar to use. But now we've got that new hole punch design, much thinner bezels, a slightly bigger HDR10 Plus screen with Gorilla Glass 6, in-screen fingerprint reader, a new ultra-wide camera lens on the back and second selfie lens on the front, and a pretty decent spec bump including 2 extra gigs of RAM and double the storage on the base model. Plus we get a much bigger battery, 4100 versus 3500 mAh. So I would say that's a pretty big upgrade, but then when you consider you can get the S9 Plus now for around £600, about 300 less than the S10 Plus, I think it is still worth considering. Having said that, if you're happy to forego the latest processor, the hole punch design, and a few other little bits and pieces, actually, I think the Galaxy Note 9 is a very strong contender. It costs about £700 now, plus you get those nice symmetrical bezels, which I know some people prefer, and of course the S Pen. But let's put the competition to one side for a moment and concentrate on the S10 Plus. While not everyone is a fan of that hole punch design, especially on the S10 Plus with the dual camera lenses and that pill-shaped cutout, although you can actually add a software bezel if you want, personally I actually do quite like it, and I think it adds just a bit of character, especially when you can do things like this. I mean, if that's not a reason to buy an S10 Plus, then I don't know what is. Yes, the hole punch cuts into full screen videos and games, but if you hold the phone in landscape with the cameras in the lower right corner, your thumb basically covers it up anyway. Picking up the S10 Plus, you really do get a sense when you're holding and using it that this is a premium and really well-made phone. The S10 Plus really does pack in all the bells and whistles. We've got stereo speakers, 3.5mm headphone jack, a dual SIM card slot with microSD support, in-screen fingerprint reader, Face ID, plus IP68 water and dust resistance. And despite its size, the S10 Plus is actually slightly thinner and lighter than the S9 Plus. The new Prism colors also look pretty cool. I think the Prism Blue looks best, but I also like this white one, which doesn't show up fingerprints or smudges, and depending on the light, it can shimmer green, red, and orange. So it really does feel great to use, but if I had one complaint with the design, it's just that the power button is so far up. It's even higher up than the Note 9, it's here versus here. Plus, we still have that Bixby button, although you can actually quite easily remap it to launch any app you want. I've got it set to open the clock so I can quickly set alarms. It's actually pretty useful. Let's talk about that screen though. The new dynamic AMOLED panel is simply stunning. It's the nicest screen I've ever seen on a phone. It's 6.4 inches, has a 19:9 aspect ratio, and a Quad HD Plus resolution. Although I leave it at the default Full HD Plus res as it's hard to really see the difference, and it does save between 5 and 10% of the battery life. I also put the display colors in vivid mode rather than the natural default. It is less accurate, but I prefer the more vibrant look. It's also the first phone to support HDR10 Plus, which is Samsung's own fancy HDR tech, which works a bit like Dolby Vision in terms of offering frame-by-frame HDR. Right now, only a few UHD Blu-rays and movies on Amazon Video actually support it, but the list should grow as Samsung's TVs also offer it, and you can also now record 4K HDR10 Plus video on the phone itself. More importantly though, I think, is the fact that this screen gets seriously bright, up to a peak of 1200 nits, which means even if you're out and about with bright sunlight, it's still really easy to use. Playing games is also a treat on the S10 Plus. I mean, not only do you have that fantastic screen, but the new Snapdragon 855 or the Exynos 9820 processors, depending on where you live, Plus the 8 gigs of RAM means everything just runs flawlessly. There's also a version of the S10 Plus with 12 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage, if you have extremely deep pockets and want bragging rights of having a slightly more powerful phone. Although if you're planning to use Samsung's DeX feature, which gives you like an Android desktop, and you're a bit of a power user, then that extra RAM and storage could come in handy. More importantly though, it's the software. I do generally prefer stock Android where possible, but Samsung's One UI feels much cleaner and more modern than previous versions. And coming from Huawei's EMUI on the Mate 20 Pro, yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. It's slick, responsive, and once you enable the reduce animation setting, turn night mode on, lower the screen zoom size a little bit, and remap the Bixby key, you're good to go. I also really like just how seamless unlocking the phone can be. I tend to use the Face Unlock feature, Face ID, and combined with the lift to wake gesture, which is enabled by default, pick it up, hold it, face, boom. Pretty good. Now unfortunately it doesn't have an IR scanner like the iPhone, so it doesn't work as well at nighttime. It's relying on light to see your face. So most of the time I do use face unlocking, but sometimes if I'm out in the evening or it's getting dark, it doesn't work quite as consistently well. So then I'll usually switch to using the Ultrasonic fingerprint reader, which again is also very, very fast. It's not 100% reliable, just one too many times I get a no match, but I have found there's a couple of tricks. First of all, don't press down. It just requires you to tap your finger on it. You don't have to press it down, it's not pressure sensitive. Also, register the same fingerprint multiple times, like 3 times. That vastly improved how reliable it is. And you can see just how fast that is. Plus, because it's an ultrasonic 3D scanner, it doesn't matter if your finger's a bit wet or a bit greasy, it'll still work. Battery life on the S10 Plus is also very impressive and goes toe-to-toe with the Mate 20 Pro, which was the reigning champion in my battery tests. By the end of a normal working day with moderate use, I have about 35% of the battery left. I also really like the battery optimizer, which seems to do everything behind the scenes in order to give you the best battery life, but also the best performance when you need it. We also get fast charging and fast wireless charging, plus a new feature called Power Share, which basically transforms the S10 Plus into a big Qi wireless power mat. And then just pop any Qi compatible device on top, from Galaxy Buds, other phones, smartwatches. It's pretty clever, although just like Huawei's reverse wireless charging, it is also very slow. At the very least, it's a bit of a cool bar trick to show your nerdy friends. Now let's talk about the camera. You actually get 5 lenses, 3 on the back, including the main lens, a 2x telephoto lens, and the new ultra-wide lens, plus 2 on the front, with the second lens offering depth information for live focus. So on the one hand, yes, the camera is very good. I love the ultra-wide lens, and a few new features like super steady, best shot, and 4K selfie videos are useful to have. Side by side with the Pixel 3 and the Mate 20 Pro, all phones take a great photo. But there are some subtle differences, and I have to say I think the Pixel 3 does come out on top overall. The clouds have a bit more contrast and dynamic range, and there's much more detail in the ripples and little waves in the pond. The biggest difference here, to my eyes, is just how much darker the Mate 20 Pro's shot is. Having said that, if you look at the lamppost on the S10, it's a bit bluish and just isn't as sharp as the Pixel, which I think overall has taken the best photo here. Now this is such an interesting photo because the lighting's really tricky here. We've got the very bright light from the filament bulb itself, but also darker areas and shadows. And out of these 3 phones, the Mate 20 Pro is the only one with a dedicated night mode, which gives you a 4-second long exposure, and it just helps to even out the lighting across the photo. But switching to portrait mode, things get even more interesting. The Pixel 3 crops in for its portrait shots, which means you get much less in the frame, but it is still a beautiful photo. And while I do like the bokeh effect of the Mate 20 Pro, it just comes across as a bit too dark. Although on the flip side, you could argue the S10 again looks a bit flat. Now one of the cool things about the S10 Plus is as you take the picture, you can actually adjust the level of blur, or the bokeh effect you get. And not only that, but you can switch to some different styles. Although this is one of my favorite modes, which just gives you color from the subject. It's a pretty cool effect and can really make your photos stand out. Selfies on the S10 Plus look great, and I do quite like the fact that you have the option for a slightly wider field of view selfie if you prefer. It's not a huge difference, but if you want to get a couple of extra mates into your shot, then this will help. And finally we come to selfie portraits. You guys must be sick of my face by now, but this is the last one, I promise. And this is tricky because I actually like all 3 photos. The Pixel 3 comes across as the most professional looking perhaps. It's got a really nice even exposure and the bokeh looks great, but it does look just a touch over sharpened and the colors are a little bit muted. To be honest, there's no right or wrong answer really. It's all personal preference, it's all very subjective, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. Which camera do you think came out on top overall? As for video, you can record in up to 4K 60 if you want, although from now on I'm going to use the new Super Steady mode. It does limit the resolution to 1080p, but you get much smoother video, almost like the camera's on a gimbal, and it still looks pretty good. Alright, so this has been a pretty long review, but the bottom line is the S10 Plus is an incredible phone and I do highly recommend it. Of course it is expensive at £900, and I think the Note 9, which you can get for about $650 or $7, is a good alternative. But also consider that the S10 Plus is actually £100 cheaper than the iPhone XS and £200 cheaper than the XS Max. Relative to Apple, at least, you could argue it's not bad value for money. Plus it's only about £60 more than the S9 Plus was at launch, but you get 2 extra gigs of RAM, double the base storage, and 2 extra camera lenses. That's not bad, and a much bigger battery. So right now, I think the S10 Plus is the phone to beat, although we'll see how it stacks up against the likes of the Huawei P30 Pro and the OnePlus 7. And don't forget we have the S10 5G coming soon, with a bigger 6.7-inch screen, a 4,500 mAh battery, a time-of-flight 3D sensor, and of course 5G support. So that could be worth waiting for. But what do you think of the S10 Plus? Are you tempted to buy one, or do you think maybe the S10e or the standard S10 is a better option, or maybe none of the above? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, hit subscribe if you want to see more from me, and I'll catch you next time right here on the Tech Chap.